Have you ever wondered what you could do if you lost everything you love? I have something to tell you that may make you rethink the limits of human resistance. Among the trash waters of the Savannah River, a story is hidden that few know. That of Hannah, a woman who decided to turn pain into a plan that would forever change the course of her existence. What I am about to reveal goes beyond what the books tell about slavery in Georgia. These are dark details I found after months investigating dusty documents and reports that many wanted to silence. If you enjoy discovering hidden truths that shake the floor of the official history, do not miss a second of this account. Leave your like right now and follow it to the end, because I promise that the story of Hannah is not just about revenge, but about how Savannah waters keep secrets that still echo on the banks of that river today. What comes next will change your perception of what it means to survive when everything around it conspires to its end. The wind whispers among the cypresses that today look over the quiet waters of the Savannah River, on the border between Georgia and South Carolina. There is no more shouts, there is no more the crack of the whips, only the soft water murmur against the muddy banks. In the remains of the old Willow Creek farm, where only red brick ruins resist the weather, there is still the echo of a story that the earth refuses to forget. The oldest residents of the region still lower their voice when talking about the summer of 1838, when 4 swollen bodies emerged in the Tun Savannah waters. Hannah saw in those same waters that they bathed the farm not only a path to freedom, but the manifestation of justice that the courts of men would never grant those who carried irons in their ankles. Its story is not just about revenge, but about how a human being, when pushed beyond the limits of the bearable, can find in the depths of pain the strength to rebalance the scales of fate. If you want to follow more cases like this which move with all society and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so as not to lose any investigation. The dimensions of Willow Creek Farm impressed any visitor who arrived on the dirt path that had been servant since Savannah. There were 2,000 acres of fertile soil, distributed between cotton, tobacco, and rice fields, the latter cultivated in the wetlands near the river. Casa Grande, a 2-story Georgian-style building, with its white columns and large balconies, stood out at the top of a soft hill, from which Master Thomas Wilkinson could contemplate his particular empire. The hierarchy on the farm was rigid as the oak trunk surrounding the property. At the top, Wilkinson, a man in his early 40s, widower, who had inherited his father's farm. Below the forefront, Malcolm Reed, a man with sun-reeded skin and smallpox scars, known for the explosive temperament and the accuracy with the whip. Subordinates to Reed were 3 overseers: the young and cruel James Harlow, a specialist in breaking newly arrived slaves; the business Samuel Green, in charge of the night surveillance; and Ephraim Tucker, the oldest of the 3, responsible for supervision in the cotton fields. At the base of the pyramid, 67 black souls moving from birth to sunset, as gears of a voracious machine. The day began even before the first ray of sun touched the horizon. The farm bell played at 4 in the morning, and the doors of the senzalas were opened by the overseers. Men, women, and children over 7 were 30 minutes to feed with a mixture of ground and bacon before heading to the fields. In intense hot months, the sun of Georgia turned the cotton fields into open-air furnaces. Sweat mingled with the blood in the hands injured by the thorny capsules. Anyone who diminished the rhythm felt the whip kiss on the back. To ensure productivity, Reed had instituted a quota system. Each adult slave should harvest at least 150 pounds of cotton per day during the harvest. Those who did not reach the goal were taken to the trunk, strategically located in front of the senzalas, so that everyone could witness the punishment. The senzalas, rough wooden constructions with dirt floor, aligned themselves 200 meters from the big house. Each one housed up to 12 people, without partitions, on wooden roads covered with straw. The suffocating heat in summer alternated with the sharp cold in winter, when the wind whistled over the cracks of the walls. The smell of exhausted bodies, urine, and hopelessness pervaded the air. To control any attempted escape, slaves wore iron collars with sharp outwards that prevented the race for the woods. Others carried a halter balls rented to the ankles. Hunting dogs, 6 mastins trained to pursue fugitives, were kept in kennels near the home of the foreman Reed. The sound of his barks at night was a constant reminder of what he was waiting for anyone who dreamed of freedom. The sunset brought no rest, but new tasks: repair tools, process cotton, take care of animals. Only after 9 o'clock at night did slaves finally retire to the senzalas, where the ranger of the wooden boards mixed with muffled cries and whispers from former Africa songs. That afternoon, as the sun began its descent on the horizon, a black cloud formed over the river. The air was dense, loaded. The elders exchanged glances. Storm coming. But perhaps it wasn't just the approaching rain. In the dark waters of Savannah, something was about to wake up. Hannah was not like the others. At the age of 28, he carried the signs of a life on his body, but his dark eyes kept a spark that the punishments had not been able to erase. Born on his own farm, the daughter of a cook and a carpenter, early on showed acute intelligence that did not go unnoticed by the old master, father of Thomas Wilkinson. Her competence with herbs and medicinal plants, a knowledge inherited from her grandmother who came from Mali, led her to be trained as an assistant to the white lady who attended sick slaves. Over time, when you passed away, Hannah took the role of healer of the farm. This status gave him a rare privilege. He could circulate between the big house and the senzalas, between the world of lords and the world of slaves. Hannah knew every plant that grew in the swamps around the Savannah River. I knew which roots alleviate fevers, which leaves they stop bleeding, which shells calm pain. He also knew which one can kill, if mixed in the right proportion. But this knowledge she kept only for herself. In the big house, where he entered to deal with some sickness of whites, his eyes recorded everything: the routines, the habits, the vulnerabilities. He heard conversations that he should not hear as he pretended to be absorbed in his work. Thomas Wilkinson, like many of his class, considered slaves objects without their own thoughts, and spoke freely in their presence. Hannah had also gained the confidence of the slave community. In the rare hours of rest on Sundays, many looked for her not only to treat physical ills, but to share anxieties, ask advice, or simply find a moment of comfort. In their skillful hands and in their measured words, they found a force that helped them withstand another week. The paradox of his existence was manifested in this constant traffic between worlds, respected by his knowledge, but always remembering that a single mistake could cost him everything. On moonless nights, Hannah sometimes slides to the river. There, contemplating the black waters of Savannah, he allowed himself to dream of something beyond the limits of the farm. His grandfather, before being sold to another plantation, had told him stories about the great river that, in his homeland, carried the souls of the dead. Perhaps this river could also take souls. Perhaps it could take yours to freedom. There was another skill that Hannah cultivated secretly. Growing up near the river, he had learned to swim as a child, taught by his father before he was sold. It was a rare knowledge among slaves. Many gentlemen prevented them from learning, fearing that it facilitates escapes. Hannah, however, moved in the waters with the grace of an otter, plunging into the depths where not even the foreman could reach it. Leave in the comments. Never give up the truth if you believe justice must reach all the oppressed. Willow Creek Farm was not just a place of forced labor, but a theater of horrors where each act of cruelty seemed to overcome the previous one. In the spring of 1837, when a drought hit the region, reducing the harvest, Thomas Wilkinson intensified the work requirements to compensate for losses. The already strenuous journeys extended to the limit of human resistance. It was at this time that the young Isaiah, just 9 years old, passed out while carrying water to the field workers. Floor James Harlow, playing fainting as laziness, ordered the boy to be tied to a tree and whipped until he learned. 5 whips later, the boy's fragile heart stopped. When Hannah arrived, she was in a hurry. She could do nothing but close her lifeless eyes. The following week, Esther, a 7-month-old 30-year-old woman, went into premature labor after a full day under the scorching sun. The placenta took off, causing severe bleeding. Hannah fought all night to save her, but without the necessary resources, she saw life let the body of Esther and her baby, not born. The fall brought a fever epidemic that spread through the overcrowded senzalas. 7 slaves, including 2 children, succumbed in less than 2 weeks. When Hannah begged for drugs to Casa Grande, the foreman Reed replied that it was cheaper to buy new blacks than spend on patients for sick. In December, an escape attempt ended in tragedy. 3 men, enjoying the darkness of a moonless night, tried to reach the river, were captured by dogs before reaching the banks. As an exemplary punishment, Wilkinson ordered them to have cut Achilles tendons to make sure they never tried to escape. The operation, carried out by Samuel Green himself with a butcher knife, turned the 3 into permanent cripples. Hannah watched all this. Each new horror was engraved in his memory like an ember iron. His face remained impassive, like a polished wood mask. But inside, something was changing. Every scream, every death, every humiliation added a new layer to its being, not of fear or submission, but of a cold determination. At night, when dealing with the wounded, his kind hands contrasted with the thoughts that now occupied his mind. While applying poultice on the back lacerated by the whip, his eyes watched the movement of the big house, the routine of the overseers, the habits of Wilkinson. As he hummed softly to calm a scared child, his mind calculated distances, times, possibilities. The woman who emerged from this sequence of horrors was no longer the same as one day she had just dreamed of freedom. Now something darker and deeper took shape in his spirit. Something the waters of the Savannah River seemed to whisper as she approached her banks. Some debts can only be paid with blood. The morning of July 17, 1838, broke like so many others on Willow Creek Farm. The bell announcing the dawn, the somnambule movement of slaves coming out of the senzalas, the heat already hinting into the moist air. For Hannah, however, that day marked one before and after in his existence. The night before, his mother, Abigail, the only family left, had been called to the big house. Thomas Wilkinson had fever and cough incessantly. Hannah, usually requested for these cases, was attending a difficult birth in the farther Senzala. Abigail, who worked in Casa Grande's kitchen, was sent to prepare an infusion that relieved the symptoms of the master. The dawn was already moving when Hannah, exhausted after helping in the birth of a girl, returned to the Senzala, who shared with her mother. The empty space on the wooden road alarmed it. Abigail never slept outside the Senzala. It was strictly forbidden. At dawn, when the bell rang, Hannah immediately headed to the kitchen of Casa Grande. The chief cook, an elderly woman named Bessie, avoided her gaze. "His mother is in the barn," he whispered, as he pretended to be a wood stove. The barn was behind the big house, partially hidden by a woods. Upon entering the dark and dusty environment, Hannah smelled the metallic smell before seeing. In a corner, over the straw, lay the body of Abigail. His dress was torn and spotted with blood. Purple marks surrounded his neck. His eyes, still open, stared at the void. At that moment, something broke inside Hannah. Kneeling next to his mother's body, he did not pour a single tear. Instead, an intense cold seemed to take care of his being, as if Savannah's icy waters had invaded his chest. With measured and ceremonial movements, Hannah closed Abigail's eyes. He washed his body with water from a nearby bucket, using a piece of his own dress. He combed gray hair with his fingers, and then he whispered words in a language that his grandmother had taught him, words to guide the soul to the world of ancestors. When he completed the ritual, Hannah removed from Abigail's neck a small leather bag, the only object her mother had. Inside it was red land brought from Africa by Hannah's grandfather. She poured a little from this land in the palm of her hand and mixed her with a drop of blood from her own finger. Then, with his thumb, he drew a symbol on Abigail's forehead, a sealed promise. "For the blood that unites us, Mother, I promise that her tears will be paid with the waters of the river," he murmured, so low that only the wind could have heard. "You will return home through the great river, and take with you those who have taken peace you." At noon, when Abigail's body was buried in a corner away from the property, without ceremony or Marco, Hannah was already carried within her mourning, but the embryo of a plan that the waters of Savannah had whispered during the long vigil beside her mother. Willow Creek Farm was a complex organism, where each human gear performed a specific role in maintaining the system that benefited exclusively Thomas Wilkinson. This, at 45, was the portrait of the lord of successful slaves, educated in Harvard, refined in the ways, brutal in essence. His angular face, framed by gray coastal, rarely betrayed emotion. He considered cruelty not a pleasure, but an administrative necessity: how to prune a tree to improve the harvest. Malcolm Reed, the foreman, was the executing arm of Wilkinson's will. A former Army-dismissed former military man for improper conduct, which many suspected being excessive sadism even for military standards, found on the farm the perfect environment to exercise his authority without restrictions. Its specialty was to discover each slave's specific weakness and exploit it methodically until it breaks any resistance. James Harlow, the youngest of the workers, at the age of 23, was the nephew of an influential Savannah politician. Sent to the farm to learn the business, a talented apprentice was revealed in the craft of cruelty. His youth did not soften his brutality. On the contrary, he seemed anxious to prove his value through exemplary punishments. Samuel Green, corpulent and always sweaty, was responsible for night vigilance. He drank regularly, which made his moods unpredictable. Some slaves were more afraid of him at night, when the drink made him erratic, than during the day, when he followed a more predictable routine. Ephraim Tucker, the oldest of the overseers, supervised the cotton fields. His method of control was more calculating. He distributed minimal favors to some slaves so that they would inform about others, creating an environment of permanent distrust. The event that catalyzed the definitive transformation of Hannah from victim to avenger occurred 2 weeks after Abigail's death. It was Sunday, the only day slaves had a few hours for themselves. Hannah had been called to the big house to deal with the gout that plagued Wilkinson. Upon returning, he found a group gathered in a circle near the Senzalas. In the center, James Harlow supervised what he called inspection. A 15-year-old newcomer to the farm was naked, being examined as if it were cattle. Hannah recognized the girl. It was Leah, who had arrived the week before with a loading of new slaves. "This one seems healthy enough to reproduce," Harlow commented to Samuel Green, who watched with a lewd smile. "Let's get it down with the great Joseph. They must produce strong offspring." Hannah stopped, immovable. Leah trembled, his eyes low, silent tears dripping over his face. Around, other slaves diverted their eyes, powerless. The scene has crystallized everything Hannah had been feeling in recent weeks: the absolute dehumanization, the certainty that there was no hope of justice or mercy within that system. At that moment, observing the humiliation of Leah, Hannah had a clarity he had never experienced. He understood that it was not just his personal pain, his individual loss. It was an entire system that needed to be faced, and she, by her unique position on the farm, had the means to do something others could not. At night, alone in his Senzala corner, Hannah made his decision. "I wouldn't run away. Not just. Before, I would do justice." The waters of Savannah, which had so often observed with longing for freedom, now offered a different way. Not just an escape route, but an instrument of retribution. Hannah would never forget Leah's expression that afternoon. In the days that followed, the girl stopped talking or eating. A week later, it was found hanged on a tree near the river. It was buried without ceremony, like Abigail, like so many others. But for Hannah, that anonymous tomb became the last seal in its resolution. The plan was already formed in your mind, accurate as a map. Now it was just a matter of time and patience. During lunch the next day, while distributing a herbal infusion to relieve the fever that afflicted some workers, Hannah was approached by the foreman Reed. "Wilkinson wants you to prepare more from that gout medicine," he ordered. "And this time, do it right." He said the latter didn't work. At any time, Hannah would have lowered her eyes and muttered a submissive answer. This time, however, he faced Reed for a longer moment than it would be prudent. It was just a second, but enough for the man to frown, intrigued by the subtle change. "What are you looking for, Black?" Reed advanced a step, his hand already in the whip he carried on his belt. Hannah quickly looked down. "Nothing, Lord. I will do the medicine right now." Reed studied her for another moment, so he stepped ahead, and without warning, spat on his feet. "It's really good. And remember your place." As the foreman walked away, Hannah remained motionless, his eyes on the floor, where the saliva of Reed formed a small spot on the earth. When he was sure no one watched her, he used his foot to cover the spit with dust. It was a small, almost insignificant gesture, but in it was contained all the humiliation of a life and the decision that this would be the last time it would accept such treatment. The week he followed, Hannah was called 3 times to the big house to treat different evils: the drop of Wilkinson, a James Harlow toothache, a Samuel Green's foot infection. In each visit, his eyes recorded details: the routine of the house, the times when each one was collected, where the keys were kept. His mind worked like never before, calculating, planning, preparing. At night, in the dark of Senzala, Hannah whispered with Elijah, a middle-aged man who took care of the stables. "How many horses on the farm can cross the river?" he asked, so low that he had to lean to hear. 3, maybe 4, answered Elijah, confused. "Why? And how long does it take to reach the northern bank of Rio?" "It depends on the way. By the vow, about 20 minutes galloping, but only when the river is low." Hannah nodded, absorbing the information. "And Rio? How is it now?" "High, with the summer rains. The vow is covered. It would have to cross swimming or by boat." This last information made Hannah's eyes shine in the darkness. It was exactly what I needed to know. The next morning, during his search for medicinal herbs in the woods near the river, Hannah deflected from the usual path. With careful steps, he went to a less frequented part of the margin. There, partially hidden between shrubs, was a small wooden boat that belonged to Ephraim Tucker, which occasionally fishing in the late afternoon. Hannah watched the vessel for a moment, measuring it with his eyes. It would be enough for 4, maybe 5 people. No more than that. It would have to be enough. Upon returning to the farm, past the barn, Moses, a strong young man who worked there, waved discreetly. Hannah had treated her mother during the fever epidemic, saving her when many others had perished. The boy's gratitude was something she told. "I need your help," he murmured, pretending to examine a plant near the barn entrance. "And Sarah's help too." Moses nodded without question. Sarah, her sister, worked in the laundry of Casa Grande and had access to areas that other slaves could not reach. The trust network was being woven, slowly and carefully. Each person chosen for a specific reason, each function distributed accurately. Hannah knew that the slightest failure would mean not only failure but a painful death for everyone involved. For 2 weeks, stealing meetings, whispered conversations, and meticulous observations built the structure of the plane. The date was carefully chosen, August 15th, when a large summer storm was planned, according to the signs that the elders had taught Hannah to read in the clouds and animal behavior. Most importantly, on August 15th, Wilkinson would offer a dinner for 2 cotton buyers from Charleston. The big house would be busy, the divided attention, and, as always happened on these occasions, there would be whiskey in abundance for white men. Hannah baptized her plan with a name she kept for her, whispered to the waters of Savannah on a moonless night: the final crossing. It wouldn't just be an escape, it would be a passage. For freedom, for some. For death, for others. The countdown had begun. On the eve of the scheduled day, Willow Creek Farm lived 2 parallel worlds, separated by an invisible but insurmountable line. In the big house, the preparations for dinner that Thomas Wilkinson would offer Charleston buyers in full swing. Kitchen slaves came and came, carrying dishes, polishing silver cutlery, preparing the peacock that would be the central piece of the banquet. Wilkinson had ordered his best dishes to be used, English porcelain, stored in special cabinets. Crystals were removed from velvet-lined boxes, and the most expensive wine of its private cellar, a 1815 Bordeaux, would be served to the guests. For him, dinner represented not only a business opportunity, but a statement of his status and power. Meanwhile, in the Senzalas and in the fields, another kind of preparation occurred, invisible in the eyes of you. Hannah moved with a studied calm, fulfilling her usual tasks. That morning, he had been sent to Casa Grande to prepare a medicine for Wilkinson's drop, which plagued him especially on damp days like that. In the kitchen, while he would face herbs in a mortar, he watched the movements of the house. James Harlow had come in and left 3 times, always checking some aspect of preparations. Malcolm Reed walked through the front garden, giving instructions to 2 slaves that trimmed the shrubs. Samuel Green had gone on horseback to get more whiskey in town, and Ephraim Tucker supervised the cleaning of the path that led to the main entrance. When no one paid attention, Hannah whispered to Sarah, who folded napkins, "Tonight, after the clock hits 10 times. Sarah did not change her expression, continuing her meticulous work. Just a slight tremor in his hands betrayed his inner agitation. She would be responsible for unlocking the back door of the kitchen, creating silent access to the big house. Back in the Senzala's, Hannah handed Moses a small package containing carefully selected herbs. "In the water barrel, when the sun sets up," he instructed low. Moses nodded. His task would be to contaminate the water that guard dogs drank, not to kill them, but to induce them to a deep sleep. Elijah received another package. "For horses, only 3. You know which one." The man kept the package inside the shirt. Scared horses would create the necessary distraction at a crucial moment of the plan. As the day advanced, the sky became increasingly loaded. Dark clouds accumulated on the horizon, and the heavy air announced the approaching storm. Hannah watched the signs with satisfaction. Nature was by your side. At dusk, the first guests began to arrive. 2 elegant carriages, bringing the buyers of Charleston and his wives, stopped before Casa Grande. Wilkinson welcomed them on the porch, showing off his best smile. Men exchanged formal compliments as slaves discharged their luggage. In kitchens, agitation reached its peak. The smell of roasted meat and spices filled the air. Wine bottles were opened, crystals tilent. Animated voices began to echo in the main hall. In absolute contrast, in the Senzala's reigned a tense silence. Those who knew the plan kept quiet, fearing that any behavior change could arouse suspicion. Those who knew nothing realized something different in the air, but attributed tension to the imminent storm. Hannah, in her Senzala, sitting on the wooden dais, mentally passed on every detail of the plane. His fingers caressed the small leather bag that contained the earth brought from Africa. "Mother," whispered, "tonight your tears will be washed by the river." The big house clock hit 8 hours. The rain began to fall, first in sparse drops, just in dense curtains that reduced visibility a few meters. The wind howled between the trees, bending the branches of the centenary oaks. In the big house, the bright windows designed yellowish light rectangles over the soaked garden. Male laughs mingled with the tilent of glasses. The party was at the height. At 9:30, Moses returned from the barn, soaked by the rain. "Dogs sleep," he said softly. "And Elijah is with the horses." Hannah nodded. He withdrew from a hiding place under one board, releases 3 small vials containing a dark liquid. Years collecting and studying poisonous plants culminated in those containers. "It's time," he said. At 10 o'clock, as planned, Sarah unlocked the back door of the kitchen and left a lit lamp over the counter, the combined signal. Most of the servants had already collected, except those assigned to serve the guests. Hannah, Moses, and a young woman named Ruth approached the house under the protection of torrential rain. Meanwhile, Elijah, as instructed, released 3 frightened horses that galloping toward the fields, creating a stir that attracted the attention of the few guards who remained alerts on the stormy night. The 3 came silently through the back door. Sarah was waiting for them, trembling. "Wilkinson is in the office with the 2 men," he whispered. "Reed is with them. Green and Harlow are in the dining room drinking what is left of whiskey. Tucker went out to check the horse's noise." Hannah nodded. The plan needed to be executed with chronometric accuracy. "Sarah and Ruth, you know what to do." The 2 young women went to the dining room, carrying a bottle of special brandy sent by the master. In the bottle, Hannah had added a dose needs belladonna extract, not enough to kill immediately, but enough to confuse the senses and weaken the muscles. Meanwhile, Hannah and Moses went to the office. As they approached, they heard the voices of Wilkinson, Reed, and the 2 buyers, discussing prices and quantities between sips of drink. Moses stood in the hallway as Hannah knocked gently at the door. "Forgiveness, master," he said in a submissive voice when Wilkinson answered, annoyed by the interruption. "I brought your gout medicine. The storm will make your knees worse." Wilkinson frowned. but the pain that was already starting to bother him made him wave to enter. "Be fast," he ordered. Hannah. He entered the office, head down, and placed 4 small glasses on the table containing a greenish liquid. "For pain, master, and also brought to you. It helps to avoid the evils of moisture." Reed gave a suspicious look, but Wilkinson, already very drunk and bothered by pain, took his glass without hesitation. "Drink, gentlemen. This black is the best healer in the region." Flattered by the host's attention, buyers emptied their glasses. Reed, after observing that the others showed no discomfort, also drank his own. Hannah collected the empty glasses and came out silently. In the corridor, he found Moses. 20 minutes, he murmured. They returned to the kitchen where Sarah and Ruth were waiting for them. "It's done," said Sarah. Green and Harlow drank everything. The group came out through the back door, facing the rain that now fell with brutal force. Thunder shook the sky, and lightning lightly illuminated the soaked landscape. "To Rio," ordered Hannah. The 4 ran crouching to the Savannah bank, where Elijah was waiting for them with the small Ephraim Tucker boat. The vessel swayed dangerously in the turbulent waters. "You can't stand all of us with this current," warned Elijah, shouting to make herself heard above the storm's roar. "You don't have to," replied Hannah. "Go back to the house, now." Reluctant, Elijah obeyed, disappearing in the rain curtain. The other 4 remained hidden between the margin shrubs, observing the big house. 20 minutes later, as Hannah had calculated, the front door opened violently. Thomas Wilkinson staggered out, followed by Malcolm Reed. Both moved erratically, as if they had lost control of their own muscles. Behind them, Charleston's 2 buyers leaned on each other, visibly disoriented. "Air. I need air," Wilkinson mumbled, grabbing his throat. His face was red, and his eyes, injected. "Poisoned," he managed to say Reed before falling to his knees in the soaked gravel. In the dining room, James Harlow and Samuel Green experienced the same symptoms. Cloudy vision, mental confusion, muscle weakness. Green tried to get up, but his legs gave way, and he collapsed on the table, overthrowing cups and bottles. Hannah and the others watched from the river bank. "Now," he ordered, when he saw Wilkinson stumble toward the garden, clearly seeking relief to the internal heat that consumed him. The 4 came out of their hiding place and advanced toward disoriented men. Moses carried a makeshift club, but Hannah stopped him. "It will not be necessary." He approached Wilkinson, who was now on his knees in the mud, his face in agony face. For the first time, Hannah stared at him straight into the eyes, without submission, without fear. "The waters of the river are waiting for you, master," he said, his colder voice than the rain that fell on them. "Just as they waited for my mother." Recognition and terror went through Wilkinson's eyes. What did you do?" he managed to articulate. Hannah didn't answer. Instead, he gestured to Moses, who held Wilkinson by his arms. Together, they dragged the man to the riverbank, where the small boat was waiting. Reed tried to scream for help, but his voice came out as an unintelligible grashy. Sarah and Ruth immobilized him with surprising ease, considering that the man weighed twice each of them. The poison had done his work, reducing the dreaded foreman to a shaky and helpless mass. The 2 buyers, vaguely realizing what happened, tried to crawl away, but their legs did not respond. Hannah looked at them for a moment, then shook her head. "Leave us. Our subject is not with them." Meanwhile, in the big house, Harlow and Green, realizing that something terrible was happening, they tried to reach their weapons. But their bodies no longer obeyed, and they only managed to drag themselves down the polished floor of the hall, leaving a trail of vomiting and sweat. "They will come later," Hannah told Moses, indicating the house with a head movement. "First, the main ones." Wilkinson and Reed were placed on the small boat. Even in their debilitated state, they understood what was to come, and the terror in their eyes was visible even in the torrential rain. Hannah entered the vessel, sitting facing the 2 men. "Remember," ordered Moses and Sarah, who took positions at the ends of the boat. The small vessel moved away from the bank, entering Savannah's angry waters. The rain was a curtain around them, isolating them from the world. Lightning cut the sky, briefly illuminating the faces. Wilkinson and Reed, pale of terror. Hannah, serene as never before. When they arrived in the middle of the river, where the current was stronger, Hannah finally spoke, her audible voice even under the roar of the storm. "You believe you have power over life and death. Decide who lives and who dies, who suffers and who thrives." She leaned forward, her fixed eyes on the two men. "But tonight, the river decides." With a fluid movement, Hannah unbalanced the boat. The vessel turned, launching all in the turbulent waters. As planned, Moses and Sarah swam quickly to the opposite bank, where Ruth was waiting for them. Hannah, an excellent swimmer since childhood, remained in the water, observing. Wilkinson and Reed, weakened by the poison and unable to swim even under normal conditions, were impotent against the current. "My mother couldn't swim," Hannah said, although she knew they couldn't hear her anymore. "She feared water all her life, but you don't have to fear. The river will take them where they should go." When the two bodies finally disappeared under the dark waters, Hannah swam with powerful strokes to the north bank, where the other three awaited her. There was no exultation on his face, only a solemn stillness, as if a cycle had completed. "And the others?" Moses asked, referring to Harlow and Green, who were still in the big house. "The river will call them too," replied Hannah. "Come on." The group moved away from the bank, entering the forest that extended beyond Savannah. The storm began to amainer, and the rain now fell softer over its heads. Behind them, in the house grate partially visible through the trees, James Harlow and Samuel Green, in their poison-induced confusion, had managed to drag out. Seeking relief for the fire that seemed to consume their bowels, they both went instinctively to the water. One by one, the hungry waters of Savannah received them, dragging them into the depths where their masters were already waiting for them. The next morning, the storm had passed. The sun was born on a transformed Willow Creek farm. The first to note that something was wrong were the house slaves, who found the big house in clutter and no White in sight. Ephraim Tucker, who had spent the night at a away barn after chasing the loose horses in vain, returned to dawn. He found the two buyers of Charleston still alive, but severely sick, and no sign of Wilkinson or the others. The alarm was given, searches were organized, but it was just 3 days later, when the swollen bodies of Thomas Wilkinson, Malcolm Reed, James Harlow, and Samuel Green emerged in the waters of Savannah, several kilometers downstairs, which the true extension of the incident began to be understood. No one could explain like 4 white men, all presumably sober and responsible, were drowned the same night. Charleston buyers, still confused by the residual effects of the poison, were vaguely remembered a drink offered by a slave, and then a sense of burning and disorientation. Even more disturbing was the disappearance of several slaves on the same night. A thorough search of the property revealed that Hannah, Moses, Sarah, Ruth, and Elijah had gone out without a trail. On the bank of the river, those who knew where to look for a ritual arrangement. Small mounds of red earth arranged in a circle, each marked with an unknown symbol. In the center of the circle, still hot ashes of a small fire, where apparently something had been burned, perhaps the last connection with Willow Creek Farm. 3 days of walking north, in addition to the border with North Carolina, a small group of 5 people was silently moved by the forest. They did not follow roads, preferring old trails known only by the native peoples who had inhabited those lands before. They went north, always to the north, where there were people who helped those who sought freedom. Hannah led the group, her firm and decided steps. The small leather bag containing the land of Africa was now tied to his neck, along with another object, an iron key that had once opened the door of Willow Creek's big house. As they walked, Hannah occasionally touched both objects, as to remember what he had left behind and what was to come. There was no remorse in his heart, only the quiet certainty that he had done what was needed. The waters of Savannah had spoken, and she had answered the call. The impact of events on Willow Creek Farm extended far beyond that property on the banks of Savannah. In the days and weeks that followed, reports of the event spread rapidly throughout the region. Initially, the authorities treated the case as a tragic accident. 4 drunk men drowned during a storm. But when the inventory of the farm revealed the absence of 5 slaves, the narrative began to change. Savannah's newspapers published alarming news. Slave rebellion ends in tragedy. Prominent owner and murdered staff or black untracks. Terror in plantings, the enemy inside. The governor of Georgia received a letter from the landowner board, demanding immediate action. The occurrence in Willow Creek represents a threat to the very structure of our society. If slaves believe they can kill their masters and escape impunity, no white man will be safe in their own home. The answer was quick and severe. Armed patrols were sent to travel the roads and forests of the region. Substantial rewards were offered by capturing fugitives, alive or dead. In neighboring farms, exemplary punishments were applied to the slightest sign of insubordination. More disturbing to the authorities, however, it was the emergence of stories among slaves, whispered in the senzalas, sung in code in the fields, transmitted from mouth to mouth in the kitchens of the large houses. Stories about Hannah, the healer who had transformed the waters of the river into an instrument of justice. They called it Lady of Rio, the one who commands the waters, the Avenger. In some versions, she had become mermaid after diving into Savannah. In others, the Rio's own spirits had helped her, recognizing in her a priestess of ancient African cults. Even more worrying for slaves. In the following months, suspicious drowning occurred in plantations along other rivers in the region. A owner in South Carolina was found dead in a shallow stream that barely reached her knees. 2 fans known for their cruelty disappeared during a ferry crossing on the Ogeechee River. Authorities denied any connection by attributing deaths to accidents or coincidences. But among slaves, the belief that a new method of resistance was growing, one that used nature as an ally against oppression. In Charleston, an anonymous pamphlet circulated briefly before being confiscated and burned. Hannah's Method, a guide to liberation through the waters. No one knew who had written or distributed it, but its content caused panic among the white elite of the city. Hannah's Method, as it became known, was not just an act of individual revenge, but a symbol of something deeper. The certainty that even the most powerful could be reached by justice, that even the most oppressed could find a way to rebalance the scales of destiny. 2 months after the events in Willow Creek, the army was mobilized. The governor of Georgia declared a state of emergency in the areas near the main rivers. Soldiers patrolled the banks, and any slave found near the water without the company of a white supervisor was severely punished. Correspondence between authorities, later discovered in state archives, reveal the level of concern. This is not just a case of fugitive slaves. It is a method that spreads as contagion, an idea that, if not contained, threatens the very existence of our peculiar institution. Meanwhile, Hannah and his companions continued his journey to the north. They had temporarily separated to confuse the persecutors, combining reunion at a specific point in the mountains of Virginia. It was in an isolated cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains that Hannah first found members of the Underground Railroad, the secret network of abolitionists who helped fugitive slaves reach free states, and eventually Canada. "We know his story," a Quaker woman told him, who managed a network station. "Many consider it a heroine." Hannah denied a head movement. "I'm not heroine. I did only what the river asked me." The news that the Lady of the River had been spotted in the mountains of Virginia quickly reached the authorities' ears. $1,000 reward, a fortune for the time, was offered by its capture. In March 1839, 7 months after Willow Creek's escape, Hannah and his companions were cornered by slave hunters in a forest near the Pennsylvania border. Elijah was captured first, followed by Ruth. Moses, Sarah, and Hannah managed to escape temporarily, taking refuge in a hidden cave on the slope of a mountain. For 3 days, hunters searched the area, aided by sniffer dogs. On the morning of the 4th day, they detected smoke coming out of a fissure in the rock. "We found you, Black Witch," shouted the hunter leader. "Get out now and maybe let you live for the trial." Inside the cave, Hannah knew the siege was complete. Moses was injured. A bullet had hit his leg during the initial escape. Sarah, exhausted and afraid, clung to Hannah's arm. "Go," Hannah whispered to the young woman. "There is a passage in the back of the cave. I found it yesterday. It takes a stream. Follow the water and it will take you north." "I won't leave you," Sarah protested. Hannah smiled, touching her friend's face. You need to go, to tell our story, for the method to continue. Reluctant, Sarah finally agreed. After an emotional farewell, he disappeared in the darkness of the back of the cave. Hannah turned to Moses. I can create a distraction. Give you a chance. The man denied his head. My leg will not take me far away, and I won't let you face them alone. The two exchanged a long look, full of mutual understanding. Then Hannah removed her leather bag with the African land from her neck and placed him in the hands of Moses. Keep this. If you can, give it to Sarah. If not, she hesitated. Launch it in a river to return to the land of ancestors. Most solemnly nodded, hiding the amulet in his clothes. Hannah then approached the cave entrance. I'm leaving, he shouted at the hunters. Don't shoot. Slowly, with the dignity of a queen, Hannah emerged from darkness to the sunlight. The hunters retreated involuntarily, some making the sign of the cross. For superstitious men, created in African magic stories, the woman who commanded the waters was an almost supernatural figure of fear. I'm Willow Creek Hannah, he announced, his voice clear and firm. The one you are looking for. The hunter leader, recovering from the surprise, advanced with handcuffs. You'll go back to Georgia, Black. There's a gallows waiting for you there. Hannah smiled, a smile so serene that she disconcerted the man. I won't go back to Georgia. Before someone could react, Hannah turned over her heels and ran, not back to the cave, but toward the nearby cliff, below which a deep and fast river was running. The hunters fired, but it was too late. With a graceful leap, as if he had wings instead of his arms, Hannah dived into the void. For a moment, his silhouette stood out against the blue sky, suspended between earth and water. Then the sparkling waters received her, closing upon her like a long-awaited hug. The hunters ran to the edge of the cliff, pointing rifles to the turbulent surface. But Hannah didn't emerge. The waters had taken her, as she had always knew they would do. In the confusion that followed, Moses managed to escape the passage that Hannah had discovered. Severely injured, he dragged on the underground stream until he emerged, hours later, several kilometers downstairs. There was found by members of the Underground Railroad, who took him to a safe place. As for Sarah, he managed to reach Canada 3 months later. It was she who first told the full story of Hannah and the Rio method, preserving her to posterity. Hannah's body was never found. Some say the waters took her to the ocean. Others, which she survived the fall and emerged miles downstream, continuing her journey to freedom under a new name. Some claim that on full moon nights, it is still possible to see it on the banks of the river where it has made its last leap, observing the waters with its serene and determined eyes. Truth, as always, is lost in the fools of time and in the folds of history. What remained was the legacy. Hannah's method, whispered by generations of slaves, became more than a tactic of resistance, has become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the seemingly powerless can find strength in the deep waters of despair. In the years preceding the Civil War, landowners near rivers became inexplicably anxious during storms. Many hired additional guards, specifically to watch over the margins. Some even banned their slaves to approach water, preferring to pay white workers for tasks that would require contact with rivers or lakes. In African American history museums, among the few objects that survived that time, there is a small leather bag containing red soil. The sign next to him says, "It is believed to have belonged to Willow Creek Hannah, also known as the Lady of Rio, circa 1838-1839. In black communities along the Savannah River, there is still a tradition today. During certain festivities, small paper boats are thrown into the current, each containing a lit candle. When asked about the meaning, the elders smile and say, "It is to remember that the waters always find their way, just like us." In the old location of Willow Creek Farm, now a state park, visitors occasionally report a curious phenomenon. Even on perfectly calm days, the surface of the river sometimes unlawful at a specific point, as if something, or someone, was moving under the waters. Historians and academics debate the veracity of Hannah's history. Some consider it only a myth, a legend born of the psychological need for resistance and hope. Others point to fragmentary historical records that seem to confirm at least parts of the narrative. The only certainty is that in the communities that preserved his memory, Hannah was never seen as a victim, but as a liberating, a woman who turned the greatest weapon of her oppressors, fear, an instrument of her own liberation. And on the banks of Savannah, when the wind blows through the cypresses and the moon is reflected in the dark waters, they say that it is possible to hear a whisper, almost like a song. Rio knows. The river remembers. The river takes everyone home. If you watch so far, it is because you care about these stories that marked our country forever. Leave a comment saying, "I watched here," so that I can meet you and know who really cares about the search for historical truth. Like this video if Hannah's story touched her heart. Share Hannah's memory never forgotten.